18 March. This is Prasander K. Madamo teaching about being gifted, nature, nurture, or what.
I'm seeing things in my head like little sparks firing off, and it's not until the very last moment that those sparks tell me what on earth they mean.
I've never encountered anyone like this. He absolutely blew my mind.
To scientists, this man is a gold mine, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
This could be the linchpin that spawns off a new field of research.
Why are they all so excited?
Genius. It's what you want.
Daniel Tammet claims that since he was 4 years old, he's been able to do huge calculations in his head. So, in August 2002, we dropped by, armed with a calculator.
And you can't see this calculator that I've got here, can you?
We first asked Daniel to multiply 37 by itself, 4 times.
Okay, 37 to the power of 4. 1 million.
Yeah.
874,161.
Amazing. Just to make sure that people say, well, perhaps you just know a few of these off by heart, let me just choose another one.
Next, we asked him to divide 13 by 97.
Naught 0.1340206.
That's as far as my calculator goes.
Okay.
Brilliant.
185. 567.
You're carrying on.
Okay, do you want me to stop or?
How many points can you do it to?
100. Nearly 100.
At this point, we borrowed a computer that gave us the answer to 32 decimal places.
Okay, 0.1340206185567.
As he went on, every single number was correct. And he even surpassed the computer.
4, 6, 3, 9, 1, 7, 5, 2, 5.
You've reached reach the end of the computer. It's all 100% amazing. When you're pointing to the table and doing shapes with your fingers, what's going on there?
I'm seeing the numbers, but I'm not seeing them. It's strange. I'm seeing pictures, shapes and patterns. Almost like a square, like the texture of water, drops, ripples almost, like something reflective. It's something you can look through, almost metallic, like a bubble, like a half cloud, a bit like a flash.
It sounds preposterous, but if it's true, it blows away scientific theory. Daniel's brain seems to be doing something almost magical. It appears to be doing maths, without him actually having to think. As if this wasn't enough, Daniel is also a wizard with words. He knows 9 languages, and says he could learn to speak a new one in just a week. How can Daniel do such enormous calculations in his head? And is it really possible to learn a language in just 7 days? Currently a freelance tutor, Daniel has agreed to be tested by scientists, and we'll also be calling his bluff. Without warning, we'll give him a week to master a totally new language before going live on national television. But our journey begins in Oxford. In March 2004, Daniel took us by surprise with a dazzling memory stunt.
The ambition is to remember pi to 22,500 decimal places and to recite it in a live environment with invigilators who will be checking and making sure obviously that the recitation is correct from start to finish.
Pi is the circumference of a circle, divided by its diameter. It's a number with no pattern that seems to be infinite. Daniel reckoned he could reel off the first 22,500 decimal places without a mistake. 2 hours later, and Daniel is barely halfway.
Absolutely staggering. It's beautiful to listen to the flow of numbers. It's beautiful to see the concentration. It's always amazing to be in front of one of the world's extraordinary persons.
It's almost religious. Quiet recitation of numbers. It's mesmerizing.
56709110517210287481997.
After 5 hours and 9 minutes, Daniel is nearing the finish line. His recall has been flawless.
3587. Finished, yeah. It's strikingly brilliant.
Brilliant, yes. But does this mean that Daniel could also have learned by heart thousands of different calculations? Or does he, as he claims, have some strange power to see the answers in his head? His childhood holds a dramatic clue. One of 9 children brought up in East London, Daniel claims that he's been able to do massive calculations since he was only 4.
I had
quite a severe seizure as a very small child. A series of seizures and a diagnosis of epilepsy was made.
His childhood fits seem to have changed something in his brain.
It's really from that time that I started to see pictures in my mind, images started to form.
Intuitively, Daniel also began to perceive the patterns within numbers. Cases like this are extremely rare, yet there are others who have also suffered injury to the brain, only to emerge with a startling and often similar kind of talent. Orlando Serrell was just 10 when he received his fatal blow.
Me and a couple friends were playing baseball. I was a batter. Ran to first base, they got through the ball, and the ball hit me on the left side of the head. It was a hard hit, right up in this area, right up in there. And I just laid on the ground. I didn't go to the hospital, didn't get no treatment or nothing.
To his surprise, Orlando soon discovered that he could name the day of the week and recall the weather for any date since his accident.
November 17, 1980 was on a Sunday, it was sunshine and clear skies. June 3rd, 1985 was on a Monday, it was hot. March 28, 1990 was on a Wednesday, sunshine and clear skies. Sunday was hot. 85 was on a Wednesday. December 23rd, 1992 was on a Wednesday. December 24th, 89 was on a Sunday, cloudy. I can't explain it, but it pops right into my head.
Somehow, the circuitry in his brain is computing calendar dates.
What part of my brain is doing this, I don't know.
Both Orlando and Daniel seem to possess special powers of perception, as well as enhanced memory. There are only a handful of people like this worldwide, and they are known to science as savants.
It's quite fascinating, isn't it? What they didn't talk about that much yet is that Mr. Hammett, he can also speak many languages, and the actual test that they do in this documentary, at the end of the documentary, is to have him speak Icelandic. Within a period of 7 days, he has to learn Icelandic, which is a language which hardly anyone knows about. So, and he actually manages to, within a period of only 7 days, he manages to learn Icelandic to the extent that he can appear on television in Iceland and do a normal interview. And the interviewers, they had the impression that he speaks very good, fluently Icelandic. And his tutor said it wasn't human. Actually, you heard her voice briefly in the beginning of this first episode of the documentary, and she said it wasn't human. So when we talk about something that isn't human, it might be interesting to ask ourselves, what is it then? These are some people known, apart from Daniel Hammett. There is, of course, the well-known case Mozart, who could compose his first piece of music when he was only 5 years old, and actually he could play when he was 4 years, a whole composition, which makes us, perhaps some people want to wonder what kind of accident did he have. Some cases do not have anything to do with are very kind of more emotional talents. For example, Kevin Richardson is known to the world as someone who can live with wild animals without any risk. So even with wild animals that he doesn't know, so such as lions or cheetahs or tigers, he can seek these animals out, and he can live with them without any problems, without any danger. And he's been doing so for a long time. So this is also a special case, less intellectual, but also a gift. There is a man called Kim Peek, who was the model of the movie, maybe you've seen it, the movie Rain Man. And in that movie, Dustin Hoffman, it's based on this character. This is the actual Rain Man, whose name is Kim Peek, and he can memorize about 80% of what he experiences in his life, or 90% he can memorize fully. The person who you can reflect on yourself just before you come here. What did you do today? You still have to think, right? Oh, what did I do today? This is the limit of our own memory. If we think back, yesterday, what did I do? And sometimes it's difficult to remember. But Kim Peek can remember almost everything, which is both a blessing and a curse, of course. Wim Hof is a Dutchman. I couldn't resist to also have a Dutchman in there. I'm from Holland, so. He's known as the Iceman. Perhaps you've heard of him. He's able to use meditation and yoga, but mostly concentration and meditation, to withstand great, very icy, cold temperatures. Not just for the show, but this has actually been scientifically measured. So he's able to actually, for example, lie down in a bath of ice without any effect on his body, or he can be put into very icy temperatures without any result to his body. And he's actually teaching these things today. He's actually giving courses about how to withstand, how to use meditation to deal with, to change your bodily temperature. We won't be doing that today, but actually, he's even got a website, and I think he even has an app. So, if anyone wants to be an Iceman. So, some people might wonder, especially when you've just seen the documentary about Daniel Dennett, how is it possible that people are gifted in this way? Is it just a side effect? For example, the man that you just saw is a side effect of his trauma, that he had an accident when he was a child. In the case of Mr. Temet, it may be, they say that he has a mild form of autism. In the case of Kim Peek, he had a stronger form of autism, just like the person in the Rain Man movie. So, is autism the explanation to why people are gifted? Is it like some people, when they have a lesion in the brain, a cut in the brain, that they actually develop some part of their brain more than other parts, because the other parts are no longer functioning? Is that why people are gifted? Or should we perhaps look for a more religious explanation? For example, some people might say it's a gift of God. Or in Thai language they say it's a gift of heaven. This is the Thai expression for the English word talent. Actually the Thai word it's a fruit from heaven. And, a blessing from heaven, not a fruit, a blessing. And then there is, of course, also the cynics, the skeptics, who simply say it's all just a coincidence, a statistic, or some people might also just say they're all frauds. Well, let's just presume they're not frauds. Then I have another case, which is which is quite interesting and might give some more perspective on the explanation as to why people are gifted. This person is known in Sri Lanka as Damaruwan. Damaruwan. Is there anyone here from Sri Lanka? No. Damaruwan is someone who used to work for the government in Sri Lanka, but actually the part of his life that is very interesting is the part when he was still a young child. Let me first show you, let you listen to something.
Namo tassa bhagavate
a traditional chanting of a Buddhist sutta known as the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, or the most well-known teaching of the Buddha, known as the first teaching that he gave, first formal teaching. It's a sutta that is difficult to chant, even for monks who've ordained for a while, like me. But this child is chanting it from the time when he was only 3 years old, and his parents cannot chant it. Here you can see the Marawan when he was only a few years old, or a little older than 3, but still quite young. And at that time when he was very young, his parents used to take him to the temple now and then. But at a certain moment, what happened was very strange. He started to sing, to chant, which is quite difficult for a young toddler to do. But he chanted entire text, and in a style that was unknown to Sri Lanka, to modern day Sri Lanka. And when he started to chant like this, it was not just a few minutes, it was a long time. What I just showed you, this file is running for about half an hour and then it's finished. And it's a style of chanting which is not commonly in usage in Sri Lanka. So the parents brought the child to some monks, and the monks, they referred to another monk who was a scholar monk. And this monk said, this is a style of chanting that hasn't been in use in Sri Lanka for many hundreds of years. These days in Sri Lanka, they chant it a different way. So this is a style, an ancient style of chanting, and there's no way the child could have known that. It just reminds me of another case of a child from Texas who suddenly remembered memories when he was a soldier in a previous life. And some skeptic said, he's probably all seen it on television, and the parents said, but he only watches Teletubbies. Anyway, it's difficult sometimes not to be skeptic in these kind of cases, because a child, whose parents are very religious, the parents would like their child to be able to chant, to be able to meditate. When he grew a little older, he started to remember and explain about something in the past. He described himself as a monk, known by the name of Mudita Kosa, and who was a student of a well-known scholarly monk at the time, living in India. And he remembered more than one life, more than one moment in the past. But once he grew older, when he was about 10 years old, he could no longer chant. All his memories were forgotten, and he could not longer explain it. And this is often, actually it's almost always the case with children who can remember these kind of things like a sort of talent or gift. It's when they grow older that it disappears. But not in the case of some gifts like talent. There have been cases of people with a gift in the time of the Buddha as well. There was, for example, one man. He was known as Bhaya, or the elder Bhaya. This says venerable, but this is actually incorrect. He was not a monk. It should be the elder Bhaya. And this man, who's here pictured at the left, you can see him here. He was in the habit. He was actually, to tell the whole story, he had an accident. The ship that he was in wrecked. It was a shipwreck, and he barely survived. He had to swim out of the ocean, had to swim in the ocean, and everyone died except for him. And then when he managed to reach land, he wasn't wearing any clothes anymore. So he decided to use bark, put some bark on his to wear. But the people in those days, it was sometimes common for hermits or religious practitioners to do like that, to wear bark as clothing. So he did that. When he did that, people thought that he was enlightened. And they started to honor him like an enlightened being. They started to bow to him, and when only a few people bowed to him, he just thought, oh, well, that's convenient. There will be people taking care of me. I don't have to find myself a new job. Taking care of him, the people gave him food. But after a while, he actually started to believe that he was enlightened. Until one day, like a sort of strange memory from the past, there was some sort of person in his dream talking to him, saying, "You are not enlightened yet. You're not enlightened yet. If you want to know about enlightenment, go to a place called Savatthi, which is in the north of India." And that very night, he decided, he woke up, he was just sleeping for a moment, and the night had not even started yet. I mean, it was not even midnight yet. And he just started, he woke up and he decided, he was so stirred by the dream that he started to travel to Savatthi. He traveled and traveled, he ran and he ran and he ran. And it's said that in the single one night he managed to reach Savatthi by all his efforts. And the morning started. And that morning he finally met the Buddha as he was fully exhausted. He said to the Buddha, "Please give me one single teaching, because they say you have the secret to enlightenment." And the Buddha said, "I'm now just going for alms round." You can see here the Buddha is holding an alms bowl. And these black bowls, they are used for going on alms round. The monks will ask for food. But they don't ask by speaking, they just go along the houses. Anyone living in an Asian country might have noticed this tradition. So when a monk goes for alms round, he normally doesn't speak to anyone. He just stays in peace and quiet. So he said, "Wait and I'll come back to you." But then Bahia said, "No, I cannot wait. We never know. Our life might end. We never know when our life might end. I would like to know the truth right now." And the Buddha refused again, but Bahia insisted again. And finally the Buddha said just a few words. He said, "In the seen, there can be only what is seen. In the heard, there can be only what is heard. In the thought, there can be only what is thought. In the known, there can be only what is known." And then that very moment, Bahia attained enlightenment. Just a few words. And then he wanted to become a monk. And he went to search for some ropes to become a monk. To find some rope somewhere, if he could borrow some from someone or something like that. But the tragedy happened. He had an accident along the way. And those days they didn't have accidents with trains and cars, but he had an accident with a bull hitting him. A bull or a cow hitting him, protecting her calves and protecting her children, and then he died before he could become a monk. And then when people asked him, was he enlightened? The Buddha said, yeah, he became enlightened because of these few words. And some of these monks that were asking, they said, I've been teaching, I've been learning about meditation for 10, 20, 30 years and I've never become enlightened. I've learned so much about meditation, there are entire books and books and books in my library about meditation. But I have not become enlightened. How is it possible that someone just hears a few words like this and becomes enlightened? And then the Buddha said, it's not about how many words you hear, it's about when you hear just a few words and then you use them to bring your mind to peace, then that's worth more than 1,000 words. And that was the story of the Venerable Baya. And when you listen to the story, it might just be like one other story of a miraculous thing from a religious text. But there's a story behind it. Because it's said that in a previous life, Baya used to be a monk. And he had many other monks as his friends. And they decided together to perform quite some feat. They decided to go up into a mountain. And they decided that having climbed this mountain, it was very difficult to go down. You needed a lot of concentration to go down. In other words, it was almost impossible to go down without having reached a high form of meditation. So they decided they would go for it, and they meditate there until they could go down themselves. And one of them, two of them were able to survive from the mountain. And another 5 died during the meditation. They died because of hunger, because after so many days they could not survive. From this habit of being so meditating until the moment that he was even able to die from it, he had like an unfinished job. And right in his life, he then finished his job by only listening to a few words from the Buddha. So you could say that when you look only at this life, it just seems like a strange man wearing bark, meeting the Buddha and listening to a few words and becoming enlightened. Just like one of the strange names on the list of enlightened people. But actually when you listen to the whole story, there's a story behind it. Now this story may be a bit far-fetched, but when we listen to the story of, what is it? Dhammaruwan, we also hear about the past and the present coming together. About the past, he was a scholar, and in the present, he could still chant. Is it possible that some of our memories from the past, some of our things from the past stay with us? That some things can carry over? Is it possible that that's possible for someone like Mozart, for example, to have been learning about music in a previous lifetime? Or someone like Kim Peek or the Iceman. For example, the Iceman, could it be that he has been living as someone in an icy region for many lives? It's difficult to answer these things. But it's not impossible. Because apart from the story of Dhammaruwan, there are many stories about children who can remember their lives, their previous lives. In one of the universities, I think it's the University of Florida, there is a department in paranormal studies. And this department is very difficult to maintain because of criticism from the scientific community. But they received a gift from somebody who feels it's very important research, and so the department still survives to today. And this department was started by a man called Ian Stevenson. You may have heard of him. And today it's continued by a man called Tucker, and he wrote a book about children remembering their previous lives. I can't exactly remember the title, but it's one of the most well-known books. And this department has carefully documented, scientific to some degree, scientifically verified cases of more than 7,000 children in different parts of the world that can remember their previous lives. And there are certain categories, because Einstein was a very meticulous and precise man. So, for example, if it's an adult, they don't accept, because adults can make things up. Children can also make things up, but more difficult. Also, the memory of the child must be verified. So they must actually be able to find the information as the child has said it. So if the child says, my aunt used to live there, she actually has to live there. If it's not correct, they will look for another child. In this way, they've been able to verify more than 7,000 cases, that information that the child could not have manipulated was actually confirming the memories. Of course, there are always skeptics. But it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of people there. And some of these countries don't have any history of reincarnation, rebirth, or whatever you want to call it. For example, they have found many children remembering their previous lives in Turkey. Turkey is not a country with a tradition of reincarnation, neither in its religion nor in its culture. In other words, there's a lot we don't know about our past, but it might be that some of the things that happen in our lives are a result of the past. As it's said by our vice abbot in Thailand, he's a good Dharma teacher, and he's a good teacher, and he used to say that our life has its origins. There are certain things that are the cause of our lives. What happens in the present has its cause in the past. And he also said our life is uncertain because we do not know how the past was and how the past is affecting the present. Our life can go up and down. So we have to learn to accept that our life has a certain uncertainty about it. But our life has its value. According to Buddhism, we often say in Buddhism that human life is very valuable. It's very precious, very valuable to live this human life. Because as a human being, we can easily do good deeds. We can easily do good. There are many opportunities to do good. This life has its value. We have all the time. We have a lot of time in a human life to do good, but unfortunately, many people don't realize that. So they do not spend the time they have to do good. But there's also another part about the human life. It's limited in time, so that makes it even more valuable. When we know we have limited time, there's a lot we can do that we would like to do, that we might want to do quickly because we have limited time. There's a lot to know about the previous life and the past and the present. And it's easy for someone who is a Buddhist to say that the past lives exist. But even for anyone, whether you're a Buddhist or religion, whatever religion you believe in, it's an interesting consideration whether there is more than one, just the present. For example, there is a teaching in Buddhism that says every one of us has once been each other's brothers, each other's parents, each other's children. It sounds bizarre to many people, but it does make for a very different worldview. If we think to ourselves, the person living next to me, even though his face might look different than me, his skin color might be different, the country where he's come from might be different, his religion might be different. Still, we have once been brothers. If you look at it this way, you look at your fellow human beings in a very different way. When we practice loving kindness meditation in Thai language, you sometimes have the sentence, our fellow human beings who are fellows in birth, sickness and death. That is a very deep meaning. It means that all of us as human beings have a lot more in common than we think. And though as human beings we tend to draw boundaries between that is the other and that is me, this is the other country, that is me, my country, this is the other culture, this is my culture. But still, there is actually a lot more in common than we think. Well, this is to make a long story short about the life, about being gifted. As usually I don't provide any answers, but I just give thought, food for thought, and I hope you can use it somehow in a positive way in your life. So when you look at the example, just to finish, of the elder Bahia, you can notice that also in meditation we might sometimes feel differently. Some people seem to be naturals. As soon as they close their eyes in meditation, they're straight away at the center. But even if you are not a natural, it's sometimes good to struggle a bit, to search a bit before you find the answer in meditation, before you find your way in meditation, because then that makes it more valuable. Something that is difficultly attained is more valuable and precious. So we all have a different approach in meditation, slightly different. And it's important that you find your personal approach. Everyone has the center of the body, but the way we connect with the center and the way we relax is different. This is because all of us have different habits from the past. We may not all be gifted, but we all have an interesting past. And actually we might be more gifted than we think. Okay, I'd like to thank you for your attention for today. Maybe there's time for just one or two questions.
I have one question.
Yes.
You know, you talked about the past and how people, like some of the children have had their past, which is why they can do what they do. So what about things like hypnosis, when people go and get regression done and they can go into the past that way? How relevant would that be?
Well, I think that regression therapy is something quite interesting technique. But the thing with hypnosis is that it usually it narrows the mind to one single spot. It narrows the mind very much. So it's a form of concentration which is limited and it might be right, might be wrong. That means that the experiences we see might be different from our everyday experiences, but the perception is not always correct. I think that hypnosis as a way to get information about one's previous lives maybe work for some people, but I don't know if it can be a proof of reincarnation or rebirth by itself. But apart from that, it maybe for some people who have feel that they have some problems that carry over from the past, it might be a useful therapy. But I think it's important when we talk about the concept of rebirth or reincarnation that we realize that it's not so much about trying to find out who you was in the past, but more realizing how important the present is. Because when we have a past that affects our present, we also know that our present affects our future. So that every moment in our life is like a sort of stone that we cast into the water and it sends its waves too many lives. This is a metaphor from a book about rebirth, which was not so long ago written. Just can't remember the name, but it must be forgotten from a previous life. But it's actually like that. I think it is like that. So everything we do is important. I think that's the most important conclusion to draw from the whole thing of previous lives and the idea of rebirth. So, of course, there's the traditional idea of somebody's feeling very deeply that, or some person feeling very deeply that she was Cleopatra in the past. The traditional story, the classic story, we do not know, but the most important thing is what you do in the present. But of course, as a regression therapy, it can be very helpful. Maybe for some people, I cannot judge that. I cannot be the judge of that, because different therapies might be helpful for different people.
Does Buddhism propose some kind of mechanism by which memories could be transferred from a previous to current?
That's a very good question. Plato used to say that all of us, before we are reborn as human beings, he used that word as well. Before we are born, actually, he used the word born as human beings, we go through a valley of forgetfulness. I don't know how to call it in oblivion. The valley of oblivion. How to jump over the valley of oblivion? How to remember your previous lives? That is an interesting question. That is, I think that is very much related to meditation. Because some people, they might have the wish that they would like to remember their lives, this life, their previous lives. But our wish, not every wish comes true. Just wishing something is one thing, but to actually have the power to see that wish through is another thing. We can talk about a simple thing like willpower, which is very mundane. But there's also a power of mind that occurs when we meditate. When we meditate more, we develop a certain concentration of our mind that gradually can be developed and can go very deep. You might have heard of also certain monks remembering their previous lives. And this is also some story that you sometimes hear. Very notably, the Buddha himself has said that he remembered his previous lives and how it affected his present. These stories show that it's very much related to meditation as well. How through meditation you can develop concentration, stillness, and therefore tap into intuition and deeper knowledge within yourself. In the case of gifted people, you could say that some of that deeper knowledge within every human being is somehow accessed. But it's not accessed in a systematic way. So it's often very difficult for gifted people to transfer their skill or knowledge to another person. Because it's even for someone who doesn't, for example, like Einstein used to say that it's very easy for him to come up with an idea, but it's very difficult, a lot more difficult to explain it to another person. Because his ideas would come up like images. And when you explain something to someone, unless you are a painter, you usually don't explain it in terms of images. You have to use words. In other words, there's a deep knowledge within every human being that is beyond language, beyond logic. But that does have cause and effect in itself. And that cause and effect, one of it is that there may be causes from the past, not just this life, but the life before as well. Is that answering your question to some extent? Okay, we have to wrap it up for now. Very interesting subject, isn't it? Maybe we can talk more about it sometime. Okay. So, thank you for your attention, and perhaps see you next week. And next week it will still be me, but I think in a few weeks it will be Prandiver starting. So we have some, what do you call it, some change now and then of teachers. Thank you. Oh, if some volunteers would like to help with putting the chairs back at the back of the room, thank you. Because we use the room also for the sitting meditation on the floor.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. I usually recommend to meditate for about, for example, 5 to half an hour. Also, you can meditate in the morning because there's different that we do here, and you can also meditate before you go to sleep. On YouTube. Some people like to meditate after lunch. You say, oh, that's a good time. Ready to go.
Have you read anything on cellular memory? Cellular memory? You on transplants? When people,
like people remember something when they have a transplant.
when they have a transplant. I was reading something on that, and that this guy was saying like how because every cell has a memory,
Right.
at the time of conception, because that the conception from the mother and the father,
Right.
you have all those memories from your
Ah,
family all the way.
epigenetics.
Yeah. So like not as a physical sense, but because a cell has a memory, you're inheriting
Right.
all of your past ancestors.
Right.
So yes, you're right. If that was the case, everybody would be connected, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he said because of that, you know, when they go on about quantum physics and quantum jumping,
Right.
we've all got it in there, but it's having the meditation or the knowledge or the gift to be able to like.
So quantum jumping is that similar to quantum physics? Or?
It's whether or not you believe it, you know, it's just like anything else. You give it I've read it, but I don't necessarily say I believe what they're saying.
I haven't heard of it yet.
Yeah. It's when you meditate, you're able to go into a really deep state where you can access this information.
Oh, I see. Didn't know about that.
Yeah. So I was like.
That's similar to what we've been talking about today.
Yeah. That's just really, once you get into it, it becomes fascinating.
Yeah.
Because the more you
there's so much that we don't know yet.
Yeah. And the more you know, the more you realise you don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's wisdom.
Yeah.
To some extent.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah. See you tomorrow.
Yes. How was the talk last week?
It was. He can talk.
Yeah, he's known as a chatty monk.
Yeah. No, he certainly can talk. But it was very interesting. It's strange because you do get used to one person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then it's like it takes you a little while to settle down to someone else's way of thinking.
So yeah, he came with a jet lag and he affected. But he's
no, it didn't affect his talking.
He's someone who has gone through a lot before he became a Buddhist monk.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
He did share a lot of that, which was nice.
Good. Yeah, but it's someone who made a lot of sacrifices to become one. He had a life, he had a practice running. He was running a sort of, did a sort of therapy thing where he did sort of Chinese exercise thing. I think it was Qigong or a mixture of Qigong and Tai Chi or something. He did a lot of things and then he decided suddenly to put that all away and to become a Buddhist monk.
I can understand why someone would do that.
Yeah.
Like,
Would you like to be a nun then?
I like the idea of it. I do like that, the peaceful idea of it.
Somebody used to ask my mother that. And my mother was scared.
Really? It wouldn't scare me because I'm quite happy with my own company anyway.
Right.
But it gives me, because I work in prisons. I help.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What I do is government funding to help to stop reoffending, if you like.
Right.
So say you were in custody, if you had a business idea, I would talk to you about your business idea, see if it was viable, help you to do a business plan, stuff like that, and then access funding for you to see if there's any funding to help you get what you need to start your business.
Oh, and how is that related to prison?
Because a lot of guys or a lot of people in prison won't get employment because of
you're offering these options to people in prison.
yeah, it's like
that's very unique.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Well, say you wanted to be a mechanic,
Right.
yeah, but you didn't have the money to start your business, but you had the skills to become a mechanic.
Right.
I would help you to access any funding. You need to have a business plan.
Right.
So I would help you do your business plan.
I see.
And then I would help you write the funding bid. And then we give you support for about a year.
That's very positive, very constructive.
It is, and it's very rewarding when you get it, but what happens
Did you come up with that idea yourself?
No.
Oh. I never heard of it. I don't think it exists in Holland.
It's European funding. Yeah.
Funding or initiative?
Well, to get the actual job, we're a charity. I think you should have got some in here.
Yeah, change the plate if you
Yeah, yeah. You're not getting them all. What happens is that because of the masses of unemployment, the government put up some money to help people who want to set up their own business.
Right.
So, but to access the money, they've got to have a viable business idea.
Oh, so you're the one who screens it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And help them to put it into action, if you like. But it's
But are they not? Are you not afraid that they fall back? Relapse?
it happens all the time.
Because some of these people are not lacking skills, but they are lacking the stillness.
What I find I have to do sometimes is protect myself when I go in.
Sure.
Because
you can only do your part.
Yeah.
But still, it's very important just to. It's a way to say to someone, well, he's to be accepted back in society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting, very, very sad sometimes when you hear the stories. They're very, very sad. But then again, I can only give what I can give and accept it. What I tend to do is give them the opportunity in custody, and then say we are there to help when you get out.
Right.
And if they contact us, then they show a bit of willing.
Right.
And we'll take them up from there. But,
did you check about the project by the monk with the same order name as you? I think there's a pen here. I write it down for you. It's the man has actually received I think he received an award. I think he's actually been knighted for it. Yeah, there's a pen over there.
I see.
It's the name of the organization is a bit difficult to remember.
Oh, you write it down then.
Yeah. That's Angulimala. This is the name of a former criminal in the time of the Buddha who later became a monk.
Okay.
The organization is called this way, and the man who does it is a monk called Venerable Kemadamo. That's the same name as me. And he's, usually they don't call him Venerable, they call him Ajahn, which is similar to Pra. We use Pra in our tradition. They use Ajahn.
Okay, I will have a look.
And actually, in America, they even had made a movie about the initiatives of meditation, teaching meditation in prison. But he does more than meditation. It's more like an entire guiding process. Yeah. And I'm not sure if it's actually exactly the same as counseling, as in religious counseling.
Yes, yeah.
But the teaching of meditation in prison worldwide has often been in a non-religious setting. And even just to get into a prison, you often have to accept that it's not a place where you easily can do something religious. For example, in a prison in America. So there's a movie made about that, a documentary called Dharma Brothers. You want me to write that down?
Yeah.
You might have wanted to see that. That's very interesting. That's actually meditation teachers who teach in a prison, and they record it from the beginning to the start, to the end. And finally, the prison actually has them removed because they feel it's too religious. But the only thing they do is meditate, and now and then they switch on the tape with some chanting just to help you meditation. There's no other. Actually, there's no real reason.
No other instruction.
There's nothing offensive about it. The only thing they say is, well, if you are praying, you can pray, but not during the retreat. That's the only thing they say. They don't say your religion is wrong or anything. But finally, they get misunderstood by the administration, and they finally get kicked out. Well, not kicked out, but they asked to cancel the program. But that's after it already has had its effect. So all the people who have been in the program, they all start to change, rehabilitate, and they start to improve a lot. So some people in prison, they start to notice that. And so they get called back in once more to teach. It's a very beautiful documentary. Yeah. It's almost like a movie.
There was, I think it was Chicago, where they did some measuring of meditation, and the crime rate dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did?
In Chicago, I can't remember what the actual...
I think it's from Transcendental Meditation, I think. Yeah. They did that in schools.
Well, that's another thing that I'm doing.
Oh, you don't mean that? You mean prison?
Well, I'm doing a course at the moment to teach meditation.
Right.
Just to get the qualification.
Right.
So I've got a qualification there to do it. And it is being looked at the moment for schools and prisons, that sort of.
Interesting. Where are you learning?
It's a distance learning, but it's not. It's your own interpretation of it. It's just just so you can get the qualification to say you've got a qualification to teach. So we'll see how it goes.
It's a very nice job. I never heard of that.
It would be a lovely job, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, also the thing that you do. And you could combine them. I mean, the problem with these programs, like the Dharma Brothers, is that they give people a skill to deal better with the world, a mental skill, but it doesn't mean that they can actually cope when they go back to society with their survival. So if you could combine, it would be like our Abbott often says, economy and the mind combined.
I have a young chap up in Northumberland prison at the moment, a coloured guy, and he was in a gang in Sheffield.
Oh.
Now, his crime, from being very small, he's been brought up with crime, and he's out shortly, but he's asking, this is how silly it is, he's asking not to be returned to Sheffield, because he knows once he gets there, there's going to be trouble with the gangs because they know of him.
And they're going to kill him.
Well,
they might.
They might. So he's trying to stay in Morpeth in Northumberland. Now, his probation officer, who's going to be looking after him, his parole officer, has said, we can't do that. And I'm thinking, well, how ridiculous is that? Why have all this time? He's been in 7.5 years this time. And why have someone who wants to change?
Can't he just move to another place?
He can't. It doesn't work that way.
He's used to
because he'll be on licence when he gets out.
So he's still on parole.
So he'll have to.
Okay. Has to be fixed area.
And you think, and sometimes I just feel like, please, just give me a break.
The system isn't working.
And children, I deal a lot with disturbed children, and they put them back. They put them back into the situation where they've come from, and then wonder why we go back to what we were doing.
It's very difficult to find people wise enough to see through the system and change it themselves.
And it's at the end of the day, it's all down to Helen Schumann and Pence.
I think it's also just rigidity. To read it.
People don't like change.
I think it actually gives money to change, to develop a more effective system. Actually, I think it provides money. I don't think it costs money. But it's just that people are. Yeah, I've seen they're following the work of a man that I bring up his name, but we call it a peace seeker. And it's actually a project by somebody who's been doing disease prevention in the third world, in Africa. And like when there was a disease, a very terrible disease like Ebola and something like that, broke out, his job was to prevent it from spreading by giving information on a large scale and not only providing information but actually working with people. And he was very successful in that. Then at a certain point, when he did that successfully, he made a system for it, he went back to the States, to America. And then he suddenly came up with an idea to use this system for crime. And that means that looking through this, going through the system, changing the system from inside by he's training certain people who have been gangsters themselves before to speak with people at certain times. There's also an element of timing in it. Like just before the anger or violence is going to burst, they're speaking with certain key people to remind them of their past mistakes or past problems and to give them mindfulness. I mean mindfulness in being sense. And then but the thing is that his entire system is considering violence a disease, which is some.
Well, it is. It's a disease of the mind, isn't it? Yeah.
For Europeans, that's not a difficult thing to accept, but in a very moralist country like America, that's a very new statement. It's a shame that he didn't start in Europe. He probably would be more successful.
Right out there.
But it just shows how much people are connected to a system, and they cannot get rid from that system. In Europe, it would also be difficult because in Europe you cannot easily set up your own initiative. You have to talk, and there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of bureaucracy.
Yeah, to get through it. Yeah.
That's the problem. It's the rigidity and also the fact that people are not wise enough to go through the system.
Before my mum died, she used to say to me, how can you go into these places? How can you deal with these people?
Yeah. How did you consider to take that job?
Well, because they're not really bad people.
Right. They're just made mistakes.
Yeah. And a lot of them have just made wrong decisions, been in the wrong place and made the wrong decision.
Right.
There's some, alcohol has a terrible amount to answer for. And there was a chap just last week in Durham, and he's in for murder, and he can't even remember doing it.
Because of alcohol.
It's like sometimes it's really happy because you get a result, And then other times it really pulls on your heartstrings, you know, like you come out and you can only do what you can do.
It's strange that the alcohol companies never take charge of that.
Yeah.
Take responsibility.
Like, yeah.
I remember listening to a lecture from Heineken, the big Dutch alcohol company.
Alcohol, yeah.
It's all over the world. And they came to our university to talk about the management style. And I used to study human resource management. And they talked about that. And one of the things that she said when she introduced the company was very weird. She said, Heineken has actually prevented alcoholism because it introduced beer in a time when the temperance movement started. And a lot of people were addicted to a more serious form of alcohol, so they introduced beer at the time. They didn't say that there was also Coke and there was also...
Yeah. In Victorian England, a lot of, or even before, a lot of children were alcoholics because the water was so dirty. Oh. They drank beer instead of water because it was safer than...
So it's like an old habit. Huh?
Yeah.
Tell that to the parents of the guy in Durham.
Thank you.
Did you find your way out?
Yeah, they're like matcha company.
Well, all of them?
Especially
yeah, I think so.
I'm in the dark.
You okay? Okay.